Morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the interest of time, we're going to get straight into it. I'm assuming that our panelists don't really need any introduction, but as I start the questions, just announce your name and where you work. So we're talking about leisure travel, leisure experiential travel, and what are the trends and outlooks. So I'm going to straight start with Santosh, who heads Booking.com. More so because if you think about it, you really are involved in the pre-stay experience of a traveler. And what are some of these commonalities or differences which you have seen when it comes to travel booking behavior today, as it might have changed over the last couple of years as well? And are those differences fairly evident between Indian travelers and global travelers?
Morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. It's great to be back at another edition of Hope. My name is Santosh Kumar. I take care of the commercial operations for Booking.com in the Indian subcontinent and Indonesia. And Dilip, to answer your question, I'll start with some of the other markets in Asia Pacific, right? Talking about some of the recent characteristics and travel trends that we have observed. And starting off with Australia, in 2023, we saw a little bit of cost pressures that were impacting Australia and New Zealand-based travelers. They were starting to take cost more into the equation. Not necessarily traveling less, but I think being a little more particular about probably their budgets when they traveled. That apart, one of the other things that was really standing out for Australia and New Zealand-based travelers was the experienced event-based travel, right? We saw that with the Taylor Swift phenomenon. We saw that with the Australian Open. There were more than 1 million attendees in the Australian Open that just went by in January. The Melbourne Grand Prix, which is happening in March, booked out in record time. And in general, Australians are preferring holiday homes much more so. They have this sort of inclination to do barbecues and whatnot. And I'll link it back to the Indian preferences as well. Their preference is more DIY, whereas Indians like to be serviced when it comes to that.
Or carry our maids with us and our cooks with us.
Exactly, right? So that's Australia. As far as, and also I think another thing that was interesting for Australia, what we've observed recently is Japan has come up as a really hot market for Australia outbound. Previously it was Indonesia, but I think there has been a rise of ski-based tourism for Aussie travelers. Coming to some of the other regions, Japan continues to travel primarily domestic. There has been a national travel discount program which the government has put out, which has found fantastic uptake, where they're subsidizing a lot of Japanese travelers to travel and experience their own country. In addition to that, Japan continues to have a very high proportion of solo travelers. In general, what we observe is there is a little bit of reluctance when it comes to Japanese travelers, especially with looking at safety and security concerns, re-emergence of COVID and things like that. Talking about some of the other regions, Thailand, one of the interesting things, maybe also for the hoteliers in the room, Thailand travelers exhibited the greatest inclination when you're looking to upsell certain things during the stay. So whether it is in terms of the room upgrades, whether it is in terms of F&B, spa and things like that, they showed the greatest inclination to accept those offers. Coming to India, now India, I will use some of the recent, we put out a report on how India travels about 3 months ago in collaboration with McKinsey. And if anybody here hasn't looked at that report, I would highly encourage you to do so. From our perspective, it was groundbreaking because we covered a lot of the consumer-based research, which hasn't happened in India before. And some of the things that stood out from that, looking at booking windows. Indian travelers, booking windows, I'm sure no surprise to many of you in the room, booking windows are the shortest. It's about 29 days blended between domestic and international travel. International travel windows are roughly about 3 times higher than domestic booking windows. When you compare that with some of the other markets, Japan books 57 days in advance, Germany books 93 days in advance. Okay, so Indians are notoriously late bookers.
What's the number for India?
29, right? So that was one. The other is, looking at F&B, right? 80% of Indian travelers want restaurant or in-room service when they travel. And more they're including food dietary preferences, restrictions into their itinerary planning. And also in addition to that, Indians continue to want convenience and flexibility in terms of rates, right? They continue to prefer to want to pay at the hotel. They want that flexibility and convenience when they travel.
Just a quick one on the F&B. Indians, when they're putting in preferences, is it more based on Jain food or vegetarian food, or is it based on healthy wellness kind of food?
It's primarily been based on dietary preferences when it comes to being vegetarian or Jain-based food, Dilip. But I think there is also an emergence of health coming up. It's still early days though. And I think the last thing is, Indians love traveling in groups. We all know that. And I think somewhere also the alternate accommodation segment, which has really emerged in the last 3 or 4 years, is playing a huge role in that. And I think that's something that will continue over the years to come.
Fantastic. So, good positive outlook and trends for travel. Mary, you're probably one of the most well-known experts when it comes to luxury, experiential, leisure travel globally. So, if we just talk about the luxury traveler, we heard the WTTC presentation where so much of it is about sustainability, about wellness, and people don't just want to travel and spend money without being conscious about the environment. So what are you seeing as those trends in luxury travelers when it comes to expecting sustainability, demanding it literally, and choosing where to stay based on that?
Well, the interesting thing to me is...
Sorry, Mary, could you put your mic closer to your... Yeah.
Is my mic not on?
It is on, but just put it a little closer to yourself.
I do beg your pardon. Okay, right. Well, when Four Seasons managed to get its regular guests to reuse bed linens, that was the watershed. Ever since then, it's become the norm. And luxury travelers really care about the whole ESG movement. What I see, and I write on the world of luxury travel, I have to know what's going on in the hostel market, but I actually communicate at top level. These travelers care, they just take it for granted, and they tell their travel advisors to find out what the hotels they're considering have to offer and what they do. Now, it's not just a case of doing what Six Senses does so brilliantly, having earth labs in all their properties so that hotel guests can go and see how glass bottles are recycled and can see how the water is regenerated. They want to go into the community. The best community involvement that I've come across for some time is actually Rosewood in Mayacoba, Mexico, which completely supports a school right up to 12th grade, 18 years old, for 400 students. The hotel GM is president of the school, and he is employing some of the senior students as interns. But you have it here in India already. Taj in Varanasi took me to see a local village where the ladies are weaving the most beautiful saris, all supported by Taj. This is very necessary. Now, I am predicting that in 10 years at most, we're going to see that there will be hotels in the luxury sector that are actually built around experiences. experiences in the helping the world sector. And yes, these experiences will come with buildings that will have beds. But turning hotels inside out, watch this space. Very exciting things are going to be happening.
Interesting, interesting. Just coming back to the Indian market, Vikram, so when you think about the landscape of leisure travel and how it's changed, what you've seen in the last 2-3 years as probably a post-COVID outcome of that behavior change, what do you think are going to be the drivers going forward? Things have already changed dramatically in how leisure travel is now being done. What are the drivers going forward in your view, and how will you adapt your hotels to it?
Good morning. My name is Vikram Lalvani. I'm the Managing Director and CEO of Sterling Holiday Resorts. We have over 49 resorts across 46 destinations in the country and growing, and we are a Fairfax company. My company, we predominantly deal with only leisure. So, and the whole game in one, I think the first aspect is leisure business. The best is yet to come, number one. Number two, the whole concept of leisure travel has changed. In probably in 1980s, 1990s, when we were kids, the whole concept of holidaying was to go to a relative's house and stay. Then comes to 2000s. Then it becomes an aspiration to go on a holiday. Pre-COVID, it was the frequency had increased pre-COVID, but post-COVID, the situation has completely changed. Even as per the latest survey done by my colleague's company here, fellow panelists by Booking.com, people are taking 2.9 holidays a year. Indians are taking 2.9 holidays a year in 2023 as against what they were at 2.5 in 2022 in 1 year. 71% of the Indians want offbeat destinations. As my other fellow panelists said, they want experiences. They want to experience different cultures of the local place that they go to. So the whole game has changed. Now, what has enabled this change? Obviously, one is the growing middle class. By, I think, 2047, India will have 1 billion middle class population. Today it's just 31%. It will grow to 38%, and it will go to 60% by then. They have aspirations, they have disposable incomes. Number two is the complete change that has happened in the infrastructure of the country. In my resorts, at one point in time, 80% were long-haul travelers and 20% were short-haul travelers. The booking window was approximately about 20-25 days. And this was even as of 4 or 5 years ago. Today, it's just the reverse. 70% are short-haul travelers, 30% are long-haul. And those short-haul travelers actually happens in less than 5 days. Why? Because the national highways have really developed. People drive in, about 70% of them drive into my locations. National highways, the airports that have gone up from 74 in probably 10 years ago to what it is 150 today and maybe 200 in the next 5 to 7 years. So connectivity has gone up drastically. People's aspirations have changed. They want to take more frequent breaks in a year, which is why at one point in time, leisure business was all about a Saturday or those long weekends where there is a holidays. There used to be about 80 to 90 peak dates, and 270 days were considered lean dates. I think that whole phenomenon has changed. Right. We are running 70 to 75% occupancies through the year. So irrespective of peaks and troughs, you're flattening the occupancies, which means people are traveling through the year.
Great, great. Yeah, very interesting trend. So Deepika, IHCL is probably the only major hotel brand which has taken a branded approach to homestays with the AMA concept. And given that that homestay is a new leisure product, relatively, at least in the Indian market, how are you thinking about co-creating experiences, as Mary referred to, in the context of homestays? And within that, one more question. Because you would be doing luxury homestays also, is there a likelihood of any cannibalization of that luxury traveler into a luxury hotel now choosing and wanting to go and stay in a luxury homestay?
So good morning, everyone. Like you mentioned, homestays in an organized fashion is quite nascent in our country. At IHCL, we began in 2019, just before actually COVID had the onset of COVID, and then we saw an acceleration for this nature of a product. And after COVID, there was a sense that, are we just a byproduct of, people wanting to have safer environments and cleaner environments? But I think what I'd like to share with everybody here is, if I look at how we're performing in FY24 versus FY23, we're seeing more than a 35% growth. So I think, first of all, I think it's nice to share with everybody in the industry that homestay as a segment is something which is definitely growing. It isn't something that has plateaued or dropped off once, travel has opened up. So therefore, I don't see any cannibalization. I mean, if there was cannibalization, then, we at Amar should have experienced some kind of drop in revenues, but instead we're seeing really accelerated growth. And on top of that, we're actually just continuously opening more and more. To share with you today, we are 93 operating bungalows, and this is across different geographies in India. A lot of people think homestays is home to Goa. We're definitely the largest footprint in Goa. We're today 21, but over and above Goa, it's gone to Maharashtra as another big market. Even in the northeast, where a lot of the tea plantations are, then up in the hills, and some very interesting experiential stays like farm stays in Punjab, for example. So I'm seeing that this is a very niche segment and is only growing. We actually, in our team, a lot of my colleagues are here, Sumit, who heads this vertical, we actually have this conversation on we need to grow even faster. So I think that's very promising for all of us. I think.
Sorry, would you have stats to suggest that the average revenue per traveler in a homestay, luxury traveler, would be more or less or the same as that same luxury traveler if they stayed in a luxury hotel?
So I think the cohort that uses homestays sees it very differently. They don't travel necessarily, they travel in larger groups, because our average bungalow has, let's say, about 4 bedrooms. And in terms of ancillary facilities, we're very different from a full-fledged resort, right? So you don't have the spa, you don't have those kind of services. People are looking for more immersive experiences and more authentic experience. Even in terms of F&B, we actually want to bring the community inside, So we work with local cooks who understand the ingredients there. I myself was recently visiting one of our bungalows at Kamshed. I didn't know there was a locally grown rice from which the kheer is made, So people who are looking for those experiences choose us. And so looking at average, revenues across these two formats may not be really comparing apples to apples, because the facilities are different.
Okay. So Vikram, can you hear me? Talk to us about what you see as the current state of play when it comes to leisure travel, experiential travel, luxury travel, being in the brick and mortar side of the business as you have, as against the digital side. Obviously things have changed. All the panelists are talking about behaviors have changed. So what's the state of play today with reference to India, and if you want to give a global context as well?
Thanks, Dilip. I'm really happy to be at a hoteliers convention. Having spent myself 12 years on your side and the last 25 on my side, which is basically inbound travel. We've never seen it so good in our business. Luxury travel has bounced back, and that was actually the first to bounce back into the country post the pandemic. Usually, it's the most vulnerable and that kind of goes away as soon as there's an area of uncertainty or being uncomfortable to travel long haul, especially after COVID or with COVID. So the recovery period was a little slow. The first maybe 6 months of 2023 was slow, but thereafter it's ramped up, and I believe 2024 is positioned to be perhaps the best year of luxury travel in this country. Having said that, the biggest, I heard about spends and homestays and so on and so forth. Clearly, Dilip, the segment that spends the maximum money on luxury, I would say, is the Americans. And the Americans are not averse to spending anywhere between $700 per person per night, going to $1,200 per person per night, depending on the hotel, how exotic it is, what are the inclusions, what are the takeaways. There is also, you spoke about sustainability. I think in the younger segment is more aware about sustainability than the older. So when I say that, people in their 30s and their 40s are perhaps a little bit more aware about sustainable practices and so on and so forth, compared to the older generation. The older generation actually wants to be spoilt. They want to be into luxury hotels, luxury spas, and so on and so forth. The US is probably the highest spending segment today, at least in India and probably across the world. Thereafter is Pan-Europe, and if X amount is what an American would spend on his travel, 50%, literally 50% is what a European pretty much painting a brush across would spend, and perhaps just a little bit more in the UK. Another market that's come back, that's bounced back very favorably is Australia. And that market we are seeing a resounding success in terms of numbers. As far as the industry goes, 2024 should really remain and should be the launch pad to kind of grow business from here and thereon.
But the perception, Vikram, of India as a destination, it's not mainstream. Would that be correct to say, to an American traveler or to any long-haul traveler? So how do people perceive India when they look at it as a destination to travel to? Are we getting bigger in spiritual, medical, wellness, all those kind of things? What are the trends on that?
Yeah, India has multiple hooks, and you're absolutely right. We're not a mainstream destination. We're a bucket list. It's also one time, just that once. For the larger part, most people come to India one time. There are very few people who would come and do a repeat trip, especially if you're long haul. And India is a long haul destination. So today people fly halfway across the world to come to India. They spend anywhere between 2 weeks to 15 days, 16 days on the ground, especially long haul. You actually have shorter haul trips coming in from Europe, because it could be a week away.
Okay, interesting. Okay, let's get back to tech. So, as an online tech platform, Santosh, what are you doing to build features, functionality from the attractiveness of for the traveler into leisure products? Any major significant changes you've seen there?
Yeah, so I think technology has really been a game changer in terms of elevating people to travel more experientially. And when you think of it, today we are spending roughly 4 to 5 hours on our phones every single day. And so many people, if you're not traveling, you're thinking about traveling somewhere, right? So you're constantly soaking in travel inspiration all the time, right, through technology. And I think that's why I feel technology, social media in general has been a game changer. For us as a platform, last quarter we did a Voice of the Traveler survey, and we figured that roughly 9.5% of the trips, of the overall trips that people took with us, 9.5% of those trips were disrupted in some way. Okay, which meant, your flight is delayed, your taxi didn't arrive on time, you had some kind of an issue at your hotel check-in, whatever, right? Little things. And so what that tells us is there continues to be a lot of friction in the traveler journey overall, right? And so as a platform, for us, it's super important as we are building out our connected trip vision. Of course, we started off very heavily on the accommodation side, but as a platform, we are making significant investments in flights, cars, experiences. On the attraction side, we've tied up with Cloak and Viator. We're trying to bring more experiences that are catering to travelers all around the world. And I think what we are seeing is that in general, people want to add on things beyond just booking a hotel room, right? So value adds, the bundling of rates is something that we've seen the highest acceptance from the India market globally across all the markets that we are operating in, right? So that means inclusion of, let's say, F&B into your room rate, spas, whatever else you're upselling. That's found tremendous acceptance from Indian travelers. The other thing is, thinking about pet-friendly accommodation. That's another one where we've seen a lot of gaps today when it comes to the trip planning and discovery process. We've also seen that there has been a need to improve, I have a 6-year-old, right? And when I look at my own experience trying to book a room sometimes, there are a lot of questions that are unanswered in that process, right? How big is the room? Will it be able to accommodate an extra cot for my son? Does the hotel have a play area, things like that? And we feel that there are a lot of gaps for us to be able to fix there in order to make it easier for parents to book rooms for their children. And I think the final thing I would mention is sustainability, right? I mean, we've been hearing a lot about it. We discovered that, number one, today as a traveler, it's very difficult to find one platform where I can go to find all of the sustainable options in a particular city, right? So for us, that was the biggest challenge to fix. We've taken steps toward that in the last couple of years through our Travel Sustainable program, integrating a lot of third-party certifications into the platform, working with accommodation providers to help them bring about more awareness in their properties and things like that. But having said that, I have to say that intent hasn't yet led to conversion. Okay, the one thing I was very happy about seeing Liz's slide as well earlier was that, Indian travelers, for us, our data is saying the same thing. 90% of Indian travelers want to travel more sustainably, but when you present them two options today, let's say one accommodation which is not so sustainable, and the other accommodation which is sustainable, but if the sustainable accommodation is priced 20-30% higher than the other one, they're still not paying that additional amount, right? So intent is not yet leading to conversion.
Are they doing greenwashing is what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I think what I'm trying to say is I think there is more education required, there is more awareness required, and I think also accommodation providers need to figure out a way to incentivize travelers in some way, shape or form to be able to choose that sustainable option, right? So I feel we need more of that in the industry.
Mary, picking on from what he spoke about value added, you talked about a whole supply chain when it comes to travel, leisure travel. It's not just the hotel. It's all about what other experiences. So this supply chain, which could be events, activities, all the other things which happen as a part of a whole stay of a leisure traveler when they go and stay in hotels, is all of it stacking up in the same way in terms of delivering those luxury experiences?
Well, I'm going to bring in a very different element of supply chain. I'm going to bring in the media. I'm going to bring in the technology that we've been talking about, and the fact that it's not only adults who are spending 4 hours a day on their devices, kids are too. And this leads me to something that I think is incredibly important in the future of travel in the next few years, the growth of the next generation. I'm not talking about Gen Z, I'm talking about Alpha, the next generation, 14-year-olds, people who were born, kids who were born 2010 onwards. That includes your son. I'm sure he already has definite ideas on where he wants to go and stay. In a couple of years at least, he's going to be influenced by what he sees on TikTok. He's going to be influenced by brands, and he's going to be influenced by particular kinds of shoes. For instance, there's an UGG platform shoe that teenagers just must have. And these kids are already telling their parents, not asking their parents where they go and stay next. Yes, these kids are brought up not only with being online as a matter of life, but they are the ones who are going to be leading the sustainability movement in a few years. Unfortunately, we can't wait that long. Therefore, talking about supply chain, we need to look outside the norm, but then hotels need to look outside the norm anyway, but that's another story, and there isn't time.
Okay.
You know, Dilip, I just wanted to add something to Mary's point. Very true. I'm going to give you my example of my son. We were in Goa a few months back. We stayed at a beautiful property in Netravali Forest. And the minute we checked in, after a couple of hours, my son is like, but Papa, I want to go to the real Goa. You know, so even as a 6-year-old, his idea of Goa is already implanted in his mind, right? From what he sees in his previous stays and whatnot. So I think it's absolutely right what you said.
Vikram, so when you think about selling leisure, how is it different from a traveler's perspective to selling a business hotel? What do you really have to do differently in selling leisure versus selling business?
It's very different, and I would say I think the first, looking at it from an individual holiday seeker, how we've all been speaking about, the first thing we got to keep in mind is we got to sell the destination first. And to position the destination, a lot has to do with discoveries, experiences, sustainability, kids, for them to choose why we want to go to that place for a holiday, number one. Number two is obviously the location within that destination. So it's not as simple as just floating an RFP and getting it signed. If I have an office right next door, I will stay in that ex-hotel. Whereas for a leisure traveler, the choices are plenty. Which is why I say that even in the destinations that we run, in 46 destinations, I welcome brands coming into those destinations because supply creates its own demand. I'll give you a simple example. We've been present in Gangtok since 2010. And with more brands now taking interest in coming into Gangtok, I'm happy. I don't view them as competition. I view them as they would also invest in promoting the destination, because that's the first reason why a holiday seeker will choose to go there, is because I want to go to that X place. What has actually also made it simpler is the fact that a lot of the traffic has moved to short haul, as I said. About 60-70% have moved short haul. So actually to target them, it's far more easy because you know exactly where your catchment areas are. But it's very different from actually attacking a corporate traveler. So the process and the approach one needs to use is completely different here when compared to actually selling a city hotel. Obviously the basics of sales remains the same, but the approach actually is completely different.
Right. So Deepika, you spoke very passionately earlier when we were chatting about, travel for a purpose. And right from exploration to what do you really looking for mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, given that you've opening these properties in really off-the-beat locations. You look at Taj Safaris and the experiences there. So how is that playing out from the perspective of a leisure traveler?
So I think a lot of speakers have spoken about this, and in this morning as well, we saw some trends, you know, that whether it's spiritualism or it is adventure, there are many, many unique cohorts that are developing within leisure. And I think in IHCL, there's a very early recognition of that. And as we were speaking, I think Taj Safaris was probably a pioneering effort into looking at ecotourism and how we actually work with the local community and look at people who could potentially have been hunters become guides. You know, so you probably reset the whole perception on actually saving that forest by doing that. So Taj Safaris was our first early initiation. Then we talked about, of course, Ama stays a little while ago. And secondly, if you look at, you know, we started with Jiva Spas, which today we've called as J Wellness Circle. So to speak about how people are looking at wellness, even at the mental level, looking at it in terms of whole rejuvenation. There are so many resorts we have in our portfolio. If you look at Bakel, or recently we opened a Taj in Wayanad, which is then anchored around wellness. So, and then the third aspect of it is, of course, spiritualism. So again, in India, you know, we have so many locations. I think we have more than 50 hotels that actually are anchored around people looking at spiritualism. So there is these unique needs, you know, and India is really maturing as a leisure market, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think there's a IHCL wanting to cover all travelers' needs is well positioned. And yesterday we also spoke about our association now with Tree of Life, which is again a boutique resort offering, which is really looking at offbeat locations. So, you know, between Ama's, Tree of Life, and if you look at our resorts with the J Wellness Circle or our Taj Safaris, I think we offer the whole spectrum.
Wow. And you clearly are leading that in terms of what IHCL does. Wouldn't be too long before I would imagine other brands would get onto the same bandwagon as well. So we have time for one last question, Vikram. We haven't spoken about MICE at all, given that it's a large segment for hotels. So has that incentive market bounced back? Can India and hotels look forward to that coming back with a bang, higher spending incentive?
Absolutely. The MICE segment was perhaps, again, a little late to start out, to come back, because meetings and incentives post-COVID was perhaps a little slower than the other segments, but now they're completely back, especially incentives. And incentives, you know, at our luxury hotels, the palaces, or in the south of India, on the backwaters, and so on and so forth, private jets. So even big MNCs are bringing their board meetings to India. And a lot of them are actually focusing, not only because India is a big market to actually promote what they're doing, and they want to show solidarity with the country, but they're coming back with quick gusto. I didn't answer the last question about the perception of India. The perception of India is that we are a very stable country. We also have world-class facilities in terms of hotels, and all of you, your hotels do us proud. Today, most of the hotels, especially all across the spectrum, have won awards, are best in class, whether they are city hotels, leisure hotels, and so on and so forth. And they've kind of today, people know about Indian hotels, Indian luxury, and what we have on offer. So all in all, things are very good in the entire spectrum.
Okay, we have time for a rapid fire. So if you had the choice to build a business hotel and a leisure hotel, same amount of money, think of the location as good in a city or in a resort location, would you build a business hotel or a leisure hotel? Santosh? Quick one. Quick.
For me, given my business travel background, I would always go for business. But having said that, now I work for Booking.com, right? I have to say leisure, because you look at India's coastline, what is it, 6,000 kilometers undeveloped, I know there's a lot of brouhaha about Lakshadweep, but honestly, you just look at the mainland, right? Look at the coastline we have.
So
there
leisure
are so
hotel
many.
for you.
Leisure, absolutely.
Mary?
Okay, leisure, but of course leisure is now pleasure anyway.
Vikram?
Yeah, actually, it's the same. It's kind of a hybrid. If one can get that, you get more market segments in. I think that's even better.
A different viewer or no?
Well, all the options are taken blended and either off. So right now the state of mind is leisure, so I'll take leisure.
Okay, and Vikram?
We are woefully underbedded in the leisure destinations. For sure, I would say leisure, and I would say all the areas where most of our guests go, whether it's the south of India or it is the north of India, places like Varanasi and so on and so forth, Agra, Varanasi, good leisure, luxury, or first-class hotels. We just started. We're just getting started right now.
If you built a hotel in Ayodhya, would it be a leisure hotel or a leisure hotel? Okay, we didn't talk about religious tourism, but perhaps in another panel. Thank you very much. Yes, sorry, any last?
Absolutely, that's the next, because religious tourism is going to be very big, and of course with
Spiritual
and so on and so forth. So the Ayodhya, case in point, I think everybody is now building hotels. It's going to take, the gestation period is going to be between 2 and 5 years, but most certainly spiritual tourism is something that's a big box for India.
Great. Well, thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's a wrap.